let's kick it right off. Here's Carl Bickmore presenting top ways to get the most out of Microsoft Teams you aren't currently doing. Over to you, Carl.
Thanks, Nathan. Appreciate it. Yeah, Nathan's going to be here to make sure that when I say something incorrect, that he's going to make sure I got it right. I appreciate huge support. Thanks for having us. Hopefully this is something that's of interest to everybody, that we can find a few things that maybe you didn't know that could add to your practice of using Teams. I find that there is an awful lot of folks out there that have gotten onto the Microsoft Office 365 product, which is a really great product, has a lot of great things to share and do. And then they start playing around with Teams, and then I see the adoption and the ability to use it has a big variety of effectiveness, I guess is a way of putting it. And so, frankly, we could do 100 tips on Teams probably. But the 10 that we picked today are ones that I have seen a lot of folks that when I've mentioned it to them go, oh, that's really great. I had no idea. So maybe there's some that you'll know, maybe there's some that you don't know, but I will tell you this, being a little bit more intentional with a tool that's as core to your organization as how you communicate can have a lot of benefits. And so even if it's not one of the ones we brought up today, continuing to educate yourself like you're doing today, looking into how to improve this is going to only benefit you and your organization. And so let's dig into it. It's a very powerful tool with a lot of features and functions, and it has really changed the face of how we communicate in modern business today, this type of tool. And there's a few of them out there, but there's a lot of advantages to Teams because of the integration with Office 365 and the ability to integrate it with email, with Outlook, with your files, with OneDrive, with your Word and Excel and PowerPoint. And there's so many places where it can touch that it's just very powerful. And also some of the other things we've been thinking about a lot lately is Copilot, the AI tool that Microsoft is bringing to the market. So let's dig in. So we don't always know everybody that's here. Some of you are customers of ours. Thank you for coming. Hopefully you get value out of this and we can have a conversation later for anything. And then some of you don't know us very well, so we always take just a minute to introduce ourselves so you know who SnapTech IT is. So as Nathan mentioned, I'm the CEO of SnapTech IT, and Nathan is on our marketing team and a great resource. Know Nathan for a few years now here, so it's been great working with him. We have folks ready to serve our customers in the Atlanta, Georgia market, the Phoenix, Arizona market, that's where I'm coming from, and also in the San Francisco, California market. So we kind of cover major sections of the country with our own employees, and then we serve clients nationwide as well. One of the things that that SnapTech IT prides ourselves in is that we really work hard to make sure that if you have technology frustrations, we know that this not only affects your business's bottom line, but it also affects the morale of your employees. Downtime, frequent tech issues, slow response time, poor customer service, or cybersecurity things blowing up in your face are all things that are problems with technology that we all deal with. And we think that technology should be easier, not harder, but it seems to keep getting harder and more complicated and messy. And so we here at SnapTech IT, we follow a proven process. We help our customers with technology plans. We get you into predictable IT budgets. We make sure that you're following best practices. We're very good at helping you be able to work anywhere with secure solutions. We have friendly people on our team, and we're here to give peace of mind and make sure things are secure. And so we offer fully managed IT services. We also offer co-managed IT, where we work with your existing team to supplement or help in areas that they can use extra help or expertise that they may not have. And so those are the two different ways that we engage. And so that's a little bit about SnapTech IT. If you have more questions, there's going to be a QR code at the end that you can scan and ask more about us or schedule an appointment with us. Now, why are you here today? Because we're talking about Microsoft Teams, and we know that there's a lot of things that can happen that can be frustrating with Teams as well. You can have Teams where you find it hard to find messages, where you lose important information. And we know that if you do a better job with Teams, you're going to improve your communication in your organization. Productivity will be enhanced. And there's a real benefit to combining Teams and Copilot. It's some of the newest technology out there. And if you haven't started looking into that. We've got some good material on that we've done in webinars, and we're also doing road shows for it, where we're actually putting computers in front of people saying, here it is, give it a try. Because we just think that this is going to be something that those who jump on early will have a distinct advantage over those that are slower to adopt. And also, not to mention, one of the things that can be very interesting in today's environment is how do you have good communication with your team? It's most often done in a meeting, and a lot of those meetings are conducted by Microsoft Teams or Zoom or something like it. And how can you improve those meetings and make sure the information that's shared is captured and easily retrievable? And so there's some great things that you can do with these tools today that if you haven't dug in on, maybe there's some real benefits that you can take back to your organization and improve these things. So that's why we think you're here. These are the things we're trying to help with in our commentary. And so this is a list of the tips that we think that we've seen a lot of folks out there not know that you can do. And these are, in my opinion, real additions to your ability to use Teams. Many people understand the very basic things of how you open up a chat or post a message, but a lot of times their integration, their organization hasn't gone very far beyond that. And there's just so many more things you can do that can make it more efficient and more effective and easier for people to get their work done. And so we're going to get into these on an individual basis and just share a few thoughts and maybe some real world examples of what we've seen. Snaptech was also a very early adopter of Microsoft Teams. In fact, I wanted Teams before there was Teams. I used to use Slack back in the day. I also used other products that were trying to attempt this because I knew many years ago that email is the worst way to send things sometimes. And that's where Teams really wins, is because you can have these threaded conversations. You can have context and people can catch up in one screen rather than weird, crazy email chains that get really confusing as people drop in 2 emails back and say something that doesn't flow correctly, you know. And so there's just so many things that you can improve in communication when you take this approach. So, by the way, as Nathan mentioned too, I'm happy to take a swing at any question you have. If it's not one of the things here, hopefully I know it, or I can tell you this: if I get a little bit stumped on whatever the question is, we're happy to take it and we'll get back to you. Because we're here to provide education. We believe that the more that we help people understand technology, the more that they appreciate it, that's rising the tide for all boats, if you will. And so we're happy to help our customers and help anybody else that wants to attend the webinar or hear these things. So let's get into the tips. So this is an interesting one that I think a lot of people aren't aware of. Are you aware that channels in Teams have email addresses that you can send and receive emails to? And you might go, so like, if you haven't heard of this, you might go like, well, why would I want to use that? What would be the value of that? And I can tell you, like, well, for instance, you could say, hey, well, here's a channel that if an email comes from a customer to maybe your sales team or something, it could drop into Teams instead of into Outlook, and maybe that's beneficial as a way of doing it. But I would say another use that we see a lot is a lot of us work in multiple systems. Like we might have an ERP solution or a CRM solution that's kicking out emails systematically, and they're going to individuals that maybe they're off that day, or maybe they're not in the right place. You can redirect emails from systems into these Teams channels, and that can be kind of interesting. For instance, we've used this in a number of different ways at Snaptech IT. Like we'll have vendors that will email us if they're having some type of performance problem. And so we have a channel dedicated to that, and those emails go to that channel, and our entire company gets alerted when that happens. We also have after hours things that come in that go to the Teams channel, and then our teams, our people that are working the after hours time frame can put the Teams app on their mobile phone, set it to alert them, and it arrives to them like a text, so they're much more likely to see it. And so these are just interesting ways that you can leverage some systematic thing, sending an email into a Teams place, and then it becomes an easy place to search and an easy place to look and collaborate with other people. And so it's just a couple of ways that we've used it. So think there's vendors that might be emailing you that you could probably collaborate better on if you drop the email into, you directed them into the chat email for the Teams channel, if you will. Or you can also just have it as a way of broadcasting messages that only come via email. So each individual business is going to have different use cases on this, but many people don't know this is there. And it's important to also note, as I point out in these screenshots here, I'm showing some examples of some of our internal team setup here. You can see how we've broken up some of our teams. You just right click on it. Then there's a get email address. And then there's also a thing where you can say what kind of things can email, because you could, if you open it up publicly, maybe you'll get spam that you don't want. So you could say only if it's sent from these particular domains, or only members of this team can email, or you could say anyone, because you do want it to be publicly available. Perhaps there may be spam that would come in there. I haven't actually seen a lot of that, but it's possible. So you can control what kind of email flow can come into that team and bother your team members, if you will. But it's kind of a way of putting those worlds together. So hopefully that's an interesting thing that if you hadn't heard of that, it's just automatically there. It's just a feature. You don't have to do anything other than know the email address and give it to things that will send emails to, or people. So that's the first tip down.
Yeah, Carl, just another use case that I've seen very helpful with this is just getting everybody on the same page. You know, if there's a complicated response that needs to be crafted by multiple people on a team to an email that came in from a customer or a vendor, and you need a discussion over that, you don't want to forward the email and have it sitting in the email inbox and then chat over in your team's chat and say, is everybody looking at the right email? You don't know. And so being able to send it into that chat, to forward it in there and have everybody on the same page discussing the exact right, as you said, sometimes it could be like the wrong reply that people are looking at and say, oh no, that's not the latest, you know. And especially too with how poor people are at CCing the right people, and sometimes you get dropped off an email chain and you need everybody to see it all at once, to be on the same page, to have that discussion, and to craft a proper sensitive response or high priority response. So even just that little tidbit there
such a good point, improving the collaborability of email to begin with, right? Such a good point. It can be so awkward in email, especially because everybody's in different place. I know I'm guilty of actually hitting reply when I should have hit reply all to include everybody in the email. And a lot of times I'm on my mobile and I'm just cruising. I'm trying to get a message out, you know. It's a really good point. So hopefully that's one that might give you some interesting ideas of ways that you could set up and leverage emails to channels. It's just a default feature that many people just don't know is there. All right, let's get into some other ones. I would suspect that a lot of folks are aware of, at least, that you can hold a Teams meeting and that you can record it. I would hope that that's true. If that's news to you, well, you know, welcome to that. It's a really great way to be able to have a meeting and then leverage it for something else later. Could just be historical reference, but it could be also that you just conducted a training for your team on a particular subject, like how to do some procedure or something in your organization, and you now recorded it and now have the ability to give it to the new employee that just joined next week, so they also see that training. And so there's really some very straightforward, but also very cool ways that you can leverage the recording functionality. The recordings are stored in the context of the meeting. Ultimately, they're stored in the Microsoft Office 365 stream environment and the SharePoint, or OneDrive for Business, as it's oftentimes called. In Microsoft's infinite wisdom, you'll see different names for things. And so, but it's stored within the context of your Office 365. You can even drop them out and save them in some other file if you want to, as just a video file. But it's pretty easy to record. And when you're in a meeting, there's the more button, the record and transcribe. If you have transcription functionality on, not only will it record the meeting, but you'll be able to see the text of what was verbally said in the meeting, which can be allowing somebody to read through it instead of having to listen to it. And you can another interesting task that we began using it for is you can actually just set up a meeting with yourself, record it, record your screen, share something you want to share with somebody, and then send them the recording. And so it can be a great way to hand off a task where you can just demonstrate it really quickly. And so we've started using that a lot. Like I have somebody in another office and I want them to do a task for me. and typing out an email and figuring out all the ways, and then hopefully they know where to click and go. It might just be easier for me to just have a meeting with myself in Teams, record my screen, and just say what I and click and show what I want to do. Oftentimes a much more effective way to hand off a task request. And so not only can you record meetings with your team or anybody that's in that Teams meeting inside your company or out, or external, if you will, you can also use it to meet with yourself to record something to send to somebody else. And in fact, not that long ago, I sent a company-wide message to Snap Tech IT, and I just recorded it in Teams and then posted it to a channel for everybody to see. So rather than like I do these regular, they call them quick thoughts emails, because I'm never short on how I say it. But I recorded it instead, and a lot of folks found that to be a better way to consume what I wanted to share as just a company meeting message, So if you haven't thought of those,
we always want video footage of you rather than just typed notes, Carl.
It's a little easier to digest, and it probably takes less energy to sit there and read a really long post, which I do. I always have a lot to share, a lot of compliments for the team, and I don't want to miss anybody. But it was great. So it's just a great way to be able to get out a message in a format that's easier to digest or useful. And frankly, as human beings, we oftentimes prefer more rich content like a video versus text, if you will, right? So hey, just don't forget that you can record these things and you can share them around. And it's a great way to get that information out after the fact. So somebody who couldn't make the meeting, or you need to get something shared, it's just a great way to do it. So that's tip 2. Moving along.
So this is kind of a 2-part tip,
oh yeah, thank you.
3-part tip, because there's multiple features when it comes to video in Teams. And don't forget what Carl said on that previous slide, that when you record it, you can also get a transcription. So this is where this is a vitally important feature as well. This is a really neat one, Carl, that you and I were discussing, where if you walk into, especially in a customer meeting, where maybe it's a face-to-face meeting, or maybe it's an idea session with someone where you didn't create a Teams meeting to begin with in order to meet because you're just sitting down. Well, Carl, to your point, you can open up a Teams meeting yourself on your phone and then hit record, obviously get permission from the person who's there with you in the room, but then you can transcribe it. Start that recording on your phone, and that way it can automatically be transcribed, and you don't miss any of those helpful details that you would be covering in a conversation that where you don't want to drop those details, right?
It's like a note taker for you, right? And so way easier to do that. You combine that with the power of something like Copilot, and you'll start getting like bolted lists of your to-dos or your action items that were discussed, and it will organize it in a way that it's even easier to consume that content. These screenshots here are showing, like, if you're in a meeting in Teams on your mobile, there's a little menu at the bottom where you can do your your smiley faces, the emoticons. Or you open that up, you get the Teams menu, you go to the more options, you get the start recording. That's how you can do it directly from your mobile. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. It's just me, like, which slide are we on? Remember I remember the conversation, because we have started doing this. We'll meet with a customer, we'll say, hey, can we take notes on our phone here? And that way, it's way easier to make sure we didn't miss something in the conversation. We've started using that extensively, and it's very helpful to make sure we don't miss things, and that we can easily share back what we all talked about. Just so much easier to do it that way.
Yeah, and as a quick reminder, in that photo of me there that Carl took, he didn't ask my permission ahead of time. So I would have smiled. I would have smiled for that photo, but you didn't give me the chance.
It's true.
So.
We were working on the PowerPoint for this webinar, and I said, oh, let me get a screenshot. So I just joined the meeting from my phone that we were already in to talk about doing this webinar, and I just took a quick screenshot, said, oh, this is how people can do it. So yeah, you're welcome.
Before we move into this one, quick, Carl. So we have one of our attendees describing that their Teams toolbar looks different from our examples. Is there any quick tips on how to adjust it to make sure the toolbar shows up. So going back, yeah, I believe it would be on this previous one. So not
This
on
one
the
right here.
phone example, but the previous one right here. So the top toolbar there, I think.
Yeah, well, okay, so, well, for one, we had, this toolbar is only this. No, there isn't a ton of customization of this, okay? And it's important to remember there's a Mac and a PC version of this, right? And so the visual of it could be a little bit different, but the buttons will generally be similar. But because, for instance, we have Copilot installed, we get the Copilot option. So if you install it, you would see that if that's one of the things is not the same. But the look and feel of these buttons will be slightly different depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC as well. I took these screenshots from my system. I happen to be on a Mac. It will look a little bit different on a PC, but the options should be very similar. I would not mind a follow-up question if there's a specific thing like, hey, where do I find this? Maybe I can help with that. But generally, the three dots is the more, and it's generally in the upper right, but you only see it when you're in a meeting, not outside of a meeting, if that makes sense. So maybe that's an insight that's helpful as well.
All right, very good.
All right, we'll move on to the other tips, and we'll keep an eye on, and thanks for keeping an eye on the questions as they're coming in. And by all means, I'm happy to see whatever I can help with. I would also, in the spirit of that, I would also mention these screenshots here that I did of the mobile. That's from an iPhone. It will look different on an Android phone similarly, right? And so
Right.
however you get to the menu system, I think on the Android systems, it's the little 3-line thing that's going to get you into the menu system. But bear with me, it's been a little bit of time since I've been on an Android phone, and I don't have anything against them. I think they're great. In fact, I would say more than anything, I've worked in technology so long that I kind of like everything, but I get bored with the same thing. So sometimes I just switch because I want something different. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm on a Mac right now. I've been on PCs most of the time, but I get bored with operating systems. I've managed and done so many of them. And last year we started some new Macintosh management, our Apple computer system management functions. I said, I'll be a guinea pig. So that's why I'm on a Mac right now. But I'll go back to a PC next. Maybe I'll do something different. I don't know. For me, it's all about making sure that we all can support all the various versions that people need. And I just like variety. That's why I mix it up. Okay, on the keyboard shortcuts, there are sometimes when you're working on your computer system and you're in a meeting, and how many times has somebody called on you and you're on mute and you forget and you begin talking? No, nobody ever does that, right? Uh, sometimes it can be even quicker than finding your mouse, scrolling it over, click, and hitting unmute to just do the unmute keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-M. And that will mute or unmute, right? And that's happens to be one of the ones I find myself using all the time because it's actually quicker than doing it with a mouse, and I need to get to speaking if I've been called on. There's some other great ones here that I listed. Look, we decided, how do we even explain keyboard shortcuts? For people that like keyboard shortcuts, I know a lot of us prefer the mouse interface, but a few of these could be really helpful, like the start a screen sharing, start a recording, creating a new chat with somebody. Sometimes it's just actually faster and easier if you just learn a few of these. So I would say try a few out, see what you think. I found what I felt was a great link for a bunch of shortcuts so you can explore at that QR code there. So this is a good spot to pull out your phone and grab that link if you want, or when you're looking at the recording later, just do a scan of that QR code and it'll take you to a pretty extensive list of all the keyboard shortcuts that are available in Microsoft Teams. It is extensive. You
Yeah,
might
and
learn
to
that
your
features
point,
exist that you didn't even know because there's a keyboard shortcut for it,
yeah. And to your point earlier, whether you're on a Windows computer or a Mac, there's totally different section of shortcuts. So that's why we also put this QR code to get you to the page so you can scroll down and find the little table that's correct for you and the version that you are using.
Awesome. Very good point, Nathan. Excellent. Well, let's keep on cruising. I think one of the things that when people first get involved in teams, they start getting just a handle on, I can send a chat. And they start loving it because they're like, I'm on the phone and I've got a question for somebody else. It's really awkward for me to figure out how to conference them in. Who knows if they're even available? Maybe I can look and send them a quick message in Teams and get my answer while I'm talking to this other person. That's just an example, like just one of the killer cases, like, oh, I can do two things at once for a minute, right? And it just makes everything more efficient, right? But once you get beyond to that stage where you really get the hang of that, you might even start to build out like a meaningful structure of how your teams are organized and your channels are organized that really helps your team understand where to go for what conversation, right? And what they should be a member of and shouldn't be a member of in this conversation. But I would say the next level is once you get into what I would call the fundamentals, you should really start exploring applications that can integrate with teams. This is where Microsoft really has an industry leading position here. Other apps can chat, other apps can build channels, but not others have the same level of integrations. Now, others do have integrations, but Microsoft has this major advantage of the Office 365 environment because it's integrated across the board. And so you're going to get major advantages in connecting with Outlook, with Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Office 365 things like Delve or Copilot, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business. All these have deeper integrations really than other providers are able to do. And it's because they own that ecosystem which Teams is part of. But there are lots of third-party apps that you can integrate into Teams as well. And I thought it would be fun. I listed a bunch in the lower left. Bonusly, Planner's a Microsoft one. Polls is one. Polls is one. It's just a Microsoft one. If you ever want to send a team, hey, who would like to do this? Like maybe we're doing a potluck, for the office for a Friday lunch or something. You can send a poll and ask who can make it and what they can bring. Some other cool, believe it or not, you can initiate Zoom calls from Teams if whoever you're working with is using Zoom as well. Canva is a great graphical tool. Miro is a really nice whiteboarding tool. Monday.com is a project management tool, has a nice integration. Asana, Box, Workday, Trello. There's lots of them. So in the screenshots I'm showing on the left there, you can click the 3 dots there in the upper right screenshot there, and it will show you which ones you have available that you may or may not be using, but are available and already set up in your teams. Or on the left below where there's that app button, a little plus, you can hit that and you can explore ones that are available that you may not have available and set up and installed. The one thing I would caution you is if your IT folks are on top of it, they're going to be managing this. So not everybody would have permission to just add an app without it maybe going through change control or IT allowing permission. There's a big reason for that because adding apps, anybody with permission to add apps has the ability to add a bad app or a virus app or a hacker app to the platform as well. So one of the things we monitor and want to control is we want only known apps and approved apps to be installed. But there's an extensive list. And so, if your IT has done the job of restricting that so not anybody can add any app, you may have to say, hey, can I get permission to add this app? But then once you have permission, it will add and work just fine. But then perhaps maybe yours is not set up secure and you can go to town. Enjoy. I just say be careful, especially if you're adding apps to Teams that aren't inside of the Microsoft apps list here, because their list here is really good and safe. It's the dangerous ones that you might hook in outside of this space that does happen. So there's a little bit to be concerned with on the security side, I suppose. I wouldn't be afraid of adding apps. Just make sure that you're using good advice and have good cybersecurity principles in general about introducing new applications to your team, right? One I love to highlight is here at SnapTech, this couple years now, we implemented a product called Bonusly, which has really solved an employee recognition problem that we were struggling with as we had spread out to having folks working in different offices or some even working from home. Like, how can we incorporate them into the conversation of giving recognition and putting some real budget behind it, like they can really do something with the recognition they're given. And so we're just a big fan of it. And what I love is like anybody can go into Teams and post it, and then the rest of the team immediately sees the post in Teams of what the Bonusly recognition was for. And what I love about it is it's employees giving each other shout outs. It's not just managers giving commendations or comments to their team or their team members. It's each other. And with that, they award them points that they can turn in for actual gift cards or actual donations to charity. There's a lot of ways they can spend it. And so that's just one of the ones that I love to talk about because I feel like as a business owner, that's one that I love seeing it out there, and I love that it goes to the entire team and it's easy to catch everybody and they all know what's happening because it's in our teams and we're all monitoring Teams. So that's just an example of one that we've used. All right, so there are a lot of third-party apps. Don't forget that. If you haven't explored that, other third-party apps you are already using might have integrations that could make the whole world easier for you. Wouldn't it be great if everything's just in one screen, as an example? That's sometimes how that works out when there's an integration. Okay, so this next one is a functionality that I think it started in other platforms. Like I was doing this back in the day with Slack. Those of you who've used Slack before, which has very similar functionality to Teams, except not that Office 365 integration that Teams has, or Copilot and things like that. So using the @ symbol when you're in a Teams chat will make sure that that person or that team or that channel that you highlight gets a notification, a pop-up that says, hey, come look at this message. Because if you're starting to use this, you started to notice that there are days that the Teams chatter could be pretty noisy. Now, the benefit is it's still fairly well organized and you can go and look through it at the time that you want. But this sometimes is very helpful to make sure somebody sees a message or a team sees a message by giving them an @ mention of their name or their team name. And so I showed an example of doing it in a Teams here. I just typed the @ and it immediately started giving me suggestions. And it can be, notice it can be everyone in this chat. It could even be AI bots that you're mentioning to respond to you, or individuals. And so just don't forget that you can use that to make sure you're highlighting that you're looking for somebody to see a thing or respond to it. And another thing that a lot of people don't know is this functionality is extended into all of the Microsoft Office suite. And so you can @ mention in a Word document and somebody will get a notification saying that's it. You can @ mention in an email. And this is also very true in Teams. And I find the best use case for me is in Teams. That's where I like to. But I know a lot of folks do a lot of great email notifications and a lot of great document editing by @ mentioning people to drop in and add something to a document. So I would belittle any. I think it's all great. That's just for me personally. I love using that in Teams and use it all the time. If I want to send a message to everybody, it's a great way to highlight it.
Yeah, now, Carl, on this, some people might be thinking like, well, if you're already messaging them, why would you mention them? And so there's a couple of different uses. Like, Carl, if you and I were in a discussion, just you and me, and then all of a sudden we realize, hey, we need to bring somebody else in here to draw their attention to it, we can mention them and bring them into the loop and understand that we are needing their input. Additionally, if you're on a channel, and you can see down to the right there that you could choose a whole team to mention. And this is helpful too if you're getting just a lot of noise in your chats, like you mentioned, if there's a lot of chatter that people are getting a lot of notifications and they think, oh, that's just a general discussion, I don't have time to take a look at that right now. Well, if you mention somebody, it pops up differently and notifies them a little bit differently to let them know that it is a particular message that they should be paying attention to.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, sometimes people have their notifications configured in a way that they won't even be notified of your chat unless you mention them. And so that's it's a better way to catch somebody's attention if you want to highlight a message or a posting. So, awesome, cool functionality. If you're not familiar with it, start giving it a try. You might be glad you figured that out. Another one that a lot of people don't know is there, and this has actually been there for a while, and it also works across many of the Microsoft platforms, but Teams is a really great use case. Teams will look at your calendar in Outlook. In fact, it'll have a copy of it in its own calendar function, and those calendars are synced together as long as you're using the same Teams account with your same Microsoft Mail account for your Outlook, right? And so those things operate in total sync, and that's awesome. And one of the benefits of that is if you put something on your schedule to say, I'm in a meeting right now, it will show that you are busy. Or if you're currently in a call, it will show others you're busy. So many people don't know, but when you're looking in Teams, you can set your own availability so people know if you're available or if you're not available by adjusting it in the upper right-hand corner where your name or your initials or your picture, if you've loaded your picture into your Teams. You can say what your status is, but it will also automatically do that for you if you put things on your calendar. And so let's say you have a question and you know there's 3 or 4 people that could potentially answer that question. You can, inside of Teams, see who is currently busy. That is called seeing the availability. And so now you can know which of those three would be the best person to chat to see if you can get their message, because you can see that they're in the office and that they're doing something, so forth, so on, or that they're available. Green is available, red is busy, so forth, so on. So if you've never shown that, that can be a big deal to know this. And once again, then one way you can just automatically make teams show that you're not available is just by blocking off something in your calendar. Even if it's not a meeting with somebody, you could say, oh, I'm going to work on this project. Go create a calendar, say from 2 to 4, I'm working on this project, drop it on your calendar. Teams will automatically show you as not available. And so if people are going to interrupt, they're going to have to do it knowing that you've already said you're busy.
Yeah, and this
Maybe,
is super
yeah.
helpful too when, you're blocking time off to be out of office on your Outlook calendar. If you go up and you mark it as out of office, it automatically shows up here on Teams as well that you're out of office. So that's super handy too for the people who just are wondering, oh, can I get a hold of that person today? Especially when we get into more remote working scenarios. And so you just physically would not even know if the person is in office or out of office that day because you aren't walking by their office at all. So it's a super helpful, handy way to just figure out who you can get a hold of.
Right. So if nobody's ever pointed out the availability feature, and it kind of permeates through all of the Microsoft products, but Teams is a really killer use case for that, because it's probably somebody where you're going to want to take it and actually have a chat with somebody, or do a call with them real quick, either just an audio call or a video call. And so knowing when they're available is helpful, knowing their current status. So fantastic. Let's move on. Attaching phone numbers to Teams meetings. A lot of times people don't realize that Microsoft added this functionality, that it came along actually a fair amount of time ago. It used to be a paid license feature. It still is a license feature, but for many Office 365 plans, it's included. And so if you are doing Teams meetings or are considering using Teams meetings where people may call in or use the Teams app, you just need to be licensed for it. And like I said, for many accounts, it's free. You still need to be licensed for it though. So you go to whoever does your Teams licensing, usually this is an IT person, and say, hey, can you license these accounts so that when they set up Teams meeting, that there's a dial-in number as well. This allows you to add people by calling in. This is great if there's a low bandwidth situation where the video call or the audio over the internet connection isn't going to be great, and they just want to use a phone system to dial in. Another kind of nice thing about it is if you are using a mobile phone to dial in, you go to that calendar invite. If you just hit the number with your thumb, it knows to call and automatically put in the meeting code for you. So it kind of automates that whole dial-in experience for you if you want to do it just via telephone. And so this is adding a functionality that many people don't realize is available in Teams. So many people are like, oh, you have to have the Teams app to participate in anything. Well, it's a lot easier to get loaded up in Teams and have a video and see a screen than it used to be. There was a time 5 years ago that was a lot more of an effort, but it's so much easier now, like a lot of other platforms. But also you have this ability to do this phone, and many people just don't know that that's a function available. And they also don't know that there's a decent shot, if you're using Office 365, that adding that phone functionality doesn't cost anything. You just need to be licensed for it.
One comment here, like at the very end where it says, or not having their number stored in your phone contacts. The reality is we don't start a job and immediately load everybody's phone numbers into our phones to be ready at any given time to make a phone call. And again, in this day and age of working remotely, sometimes, we aren't issuing office phones. People are using their cell phones. By having this connected within Microsoft Teams, it's worked for us before where somebody didn't have my cell number, but they needed to ask me a very timely and important question, and they were able to call me through Microsoft Teams, and it rang on my cell phone, and I could answer it from there. Because at that time too, I wasn't in front of my desk. I was off, at a different appointment. Thankfully, it was a quick question. I was able to answer it. And so it does give us that flexibility to get a hold of one another in those situations where you can't be like, oh, well, who do I know that knows their cell number, or where can I log into our HR system to collect it and then call them? just grab their name and dial.
Yeah, yeah, quick find of communication. You can search people in your organization and come up with them quick. It probably is worth mentioning as well, what we're talking about here, especially the part that for many Office 365 licensed users, there is no charge. We're talking about having a phone number for a Teams meeting. There is the ability to make Teams a full-on, full-fledged phone system as well with a handset phone, and it's using the Teams infrastructure to do that. And you dial regular numbers to call another regular number, or you can meet with your computer or your phone in the app as well. It works in any scenario. That is a function that has been around for a while, as well as it can also be your full-on phone system. The only caution I would give you there is if you have a complicated phone setup with lots of teams or routing groups, it's not going to be the best at that. It's better for less complicated phone systems, but it works great as a phone system for those that are interested or find that helpful and useful. And frankly, getting into just regular Teams calls over internet data connection is really probably where everything's heading generally anyway, because it's in many ways easier than the traditional phone system. But it's nice to know that you can have that functionality in Teams. Many people aren't aware. And like I said, if you have the right kind of Office 365 licensing, it's actually no cost to add the licenses to add that to your meeting, so why not? And by the way, you don't have to do anything. When you set up a meeting in your calendar in either Outlook or Teams, you say, hey, I want to set up this Teams meeting. The phone number is just automatically dropped in there for you. You don't have to do anything once it's set up on the back end. All right, well, let's get to another hot topic. We could probably do a few webinars just on this alone. In fact, we're thinking about all those, and we've done some already. Look, there's no doubt that there's a form of information and a productivity revolution coming by what AI tools can offer. And I think that Microsoft is, like a lot of things, more focused on everyday business case usage than I think a lot of other vendors. There's a lot of AI platforms that have come up now, but there's really one that is deeply ingrained in your teams, in your Office 365, in your communications, in documents you have stored there, that can really put the world together for you if you're in Office 365. Copilot is not free. They're not the way we use it in Office 365 anyway. There's a monthly fee for it, and it's not something you just click a button and say, I've now got Copilot. There's some licensing and some IT administrative setup that you want to do. But where Copilot is winning is it starts putting your world together in a way where you can just ask Copilot, hey, who did I have a conversation with about this? And it'll find it, and it will tell you if it was an email or if it was in Teams. I can't tell you how many times I'm like, did I have that in email or Teams? Where do I go looking for that conversation? Copilot can really close that gap for you when you have it. It also can do things like it can draft messages for you, like we're seeing other language learning model versions of AI out there doing. You can say, hey, I want to write a Teams post that covers these things, and it will begin and draft it for you. You can more easily search and find things really anywhere in Office 365, right from Teams or really the Copilot web interface if you want to. But the Copilot integrated with Teams is just a very powerful way. You get better search results. You can have it interpret things for you, summarize. When it's integrated with the meetings, it can do neat things with the transcriptions to help you organize task lists and reporting on the meeting. There's just so many things that you can use Copilot for that we highly recommend if you're in Teams that you're starting to explore that. Then we're happy to get you invited or show you things that we're putting out there, webinars, other integrations, white papers. We're getting the message out on this because we think that this is now already a big benefit that people should be taking advantage of, not just something to explore. You can probably already get a lot of benefit from it. It is not a free tool though, so it's up to you to figure out when it makes sense, but you should at least start exploring it yourself and then maybe implement it when you're ready. So that's just, I could probably, like I said, go on a lot about this. I don't know if anybody has specific questions. You're more than welcome to ask them. But in the meantime, I would just say, keep exploring this and looking into it and look at use cases. There are many. All right. Next tip, and we're getting near the end here. I know this is a little bit longer. Hopefully everybody's getting value out of it. You're seeing some things. I think one of the things that confuses people sometimes is, when do you create a channel? When do you create a chat? I would say chatting is more ad hoc and it's specific or more individual. So if I want to talk with just Nathan, a chat with Nathan is great. But if I know there's a place I want a regular conversation, like, hey, I got the supervisor of our security operations center. I would like to make sure he has a place that when he sends that message, everybody on his team sees it. That's a great place for a permanent Teams channel, a team set up with a Teams channel. Now you can have multiple channels under a team, so that SOC team could have a channel for alerts. They have a channel for random conversations. They could have a channel for a project they're working. They could have a channel for every project they're working on. That's a common thing I've seen project management companies do, is have a place where they have channels per project, so they know that conversation about that project always happens there, and documents are stored there, as an example. And so I think channels are more permanent, and they're meant to be built based on a user's role oftentimes, or something that they're working on, they're responsible for. So think like a department could be a channel, or a project could be a channel. And you want a place that you know you're gonna, even if somebody starts new tomorrow, that they get put into the group and they're automatically added to the channel. Chats never function that way. You always manually add people to chats. All right, but chats can be a great way to put together an ad hoc conversation. And in fact, you can even name that chat based on that ad hoc conversation. Like we do this all the time too. So this is something a lot of people don't know. It's like if you go in and type in this combination of 6 people and it's about a specific subject, you want to chat with these specific 6 people, you can go into Teams and you can hit a button and name it the title of that, and then it becomes easier to find later because you can search the name of that title and it'll take you straight to that ad hoc chat. You can get a lot of ad hoc chats going in your life, and you can find it hard to find them. I also mentioned Copilot can find them oftentimes quicker than you can as well, if you ask Copilot to look for you. But I think it's just important to distinguish. There are conversations that are ad hoc. That's a great place to do a chat. There are channels that can be added to teams that can be regular, ongoing. We have a lot that I really like that are fun. Like we have an all staff teams, but we also have under that a social channel where people can send social things to each other. We also have a customer messaging channel. So anytime we send something out to a customer, we can post it there, so our whole team knows messaging we just sent to our customer. We have things around like physical office locations, so that people can know something and make sure that everybody that's in our Phoenix office sees that message, as an example. So there's a lot of ways to do it. It's also important that, as a point that we've got here in the chat, you can appoint conversations as private or unsearchable as well. Channels is the easiest way to do that, because you can control and restrict who has permission to a channel. Whereas chats, oftentimes anybody can be added, but there's some other things you can do around security. We get in more detail around it, but a more secure approach to a conversation is to create a channel for it. So those are just a couple of quick thoughts. Chats are available by default. There's no setup. This is what I call fundamental usage of Teams, but a lot of people don't understand that there's this structure of teams with chats or channels underneath them, or there's ad hoc chats, and they tend to only use one or the other. And I would say, if you're not using both, let's think about it and think about when is the right time to use one or the other. And hopefully some of the insights I shared are helpful.
Yeah, quick add on to that, Carl,
yeah,
is like oftentimes, you described that those ad hoc conversations where it's like, okay, this is pretend it's a sales question. So we got Sean and Carl and Ted and me and a couple other people in there. We're all talking about it. Well, if we aren't calling that or creating a channel for the sales team, a year from now, if somebody moves to a different team and they aren't on sales anymore, or somebody moves into sales, they don't automatically get added to those conversations. And so thinking about the channel too as a way to regulate onboarding and offboarding of employees so that they get put into the right conversations, that they aren't missing anything, that they aren't, oh, well, we continued this conversation with just these members. At the time, it was everybody on the sales team, but now we've got some new hires and these conversations are still going on and they're in the dark. And so to treat it also as a strategy for making sure that when you onboard and offboard people, they're in the right conversations.
Well, and exactly, it's a really great point. That historical reference ability, being able to follow the conversation, knowing the history, searching into the history if you need that information. An even smaller microcosm than a new employee could be a new project that maybe somebody wasn't assigned to, and now you drop them into a channel created for that project underneath some team, like maybe it's your project team, and here's the specific customer project channel, if you will, and they could drop in and they can see the whole history of what's been going on. and it catches them up to speed quickly, as an example. Very similar, not just for their everyday job, but maybe just even a specific project, if you will. And so anything that's more ongoing than an ad hoc one-time conversation, a channel might be a better approach, something to consider, right? If you haven't thought about that, that's something that we see a lot of people, once that clicks for them, they really begin to use that in a more meaningful and powerful way. This last one is a fun one. You know, sometimes people know about these, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you hear about this, like Zoom had this thing where you call it a Zoom room. Well, Teams has a similar functionality. Sometimes getting a bunch of people together for a room or to meet in a conference room, using the Teams platform can be very, very helpful. But you know, walking in there and having like cords everywhere, hooking up your laptop and doing all those things, showing a webcam and trying to get that all functional can be awkward. It can be slow. It can be frustrating. You can have our conference room set up with Teams room equipment with a tablet in there, and you can have it set up as long as it's set up correctly in your Microsoft Office 365 as a Teams room. If you've done, you'd have to, your IT people need to know how to do this. It's not complicated, it's just they need to know, because I see all the time companies wishing they had an easier way to do a Teams conference or even a Zoom. It works the same way. But they walking in there with laptops and they're connecting all these cables and doing all these things, and it's complicated, it's confusing, it doesn't work well. You can get these tablet systems, and there's all sorts of variety and cost and functionality. Set them up as a Teams room, and now all you have to do to use that conference room is schedule it in an Outlook invite or a Teams invite in the calendar and include that room in the invite. It auto accepts it. You can go in there, you look at the tablet, it'll show you what meetings are on its schedule. You just walk in, you hit the button. You don't need a computer if you don't want to, and suddenly you're in the meeting. You could have single screen or multiple screens. And now getting a meeting started takes seconds. It's easy. Anybody can do it. You don't have to mess around with the technology derping around for the first 10 minutes while people are figuring out how to get it done. People oftentimes just don't even know this is a capable thing. This involves an IT person to help get this going, but they're very powerful and they are not as hard to get involved with as you may think. And there are a big wide range of spends that you can do, from very value-based to very high-end, very high fidelity. And so you can kind of pick what zone makes sense for you. But now getting that meeting to function is as simple as just sending a calendar invite to a meeting, and that invite includes the room, the conference room. And so that just becomes a very powerful way to do it. And now it's integrated with everything else you're doing, where you can have the co-pilot transcription of it and the recordings and all these things. Do you have a comment there, Nathan?
Yeah, just something to kind of connect a couple of dots that you mentioned, but to highlight. You said it needs IT admin setup. And the reason for that is, and you've seen mistakes of this before, where people don't set it up properly as a room, they just set it up as an additional user. Well, you
Yeah.
mentioned that if you set it up properly as a room, it's gonna automatically accept meeting invites. It doesn't have to, you don't have to put somebody there babysitting the email inbox or whatever of that user who runs the room to accept invites or decline them. So
I had seen this a
definitely
bunch
make
of
sure
times.
you're getting it set up correctly.
Yeah, what happens is when the IPT people don't know about this, and there's a shocking amount that don't, what they do is they go create another user account and they call it conference room. That's the user's username and login. And they start telling everybody, here's the conference room schedule. And they'll maybe even set up a computer in there with that user account logged in. What you're not taking advantage of the actual room functionality and the ability to use tablets or things like this. And what you're doing is you're causing yourself an extra user account that requires a lot more finagling to manage. And so the room functionality is far superior for this. And so don't use just a regular old user account as your conference room account. That's a miss on how you could make this easier and higher functioning for you. And so just, yeah, if that's what you think's going on, it could be a good question to talk to your IT person about how they've gone about that. And look, there is some education. You got to learn how to do that setup. Not everybody knows how. You got to learn. It's not like a really long course, but I find that there's a lot of folks out there that just they haven't done their homework. They haven't quite adopted. Haven't gone through the education or the certification of learning some of the Office 365 things that are out there, and resources and conference room setup, Teams rooms, if you will, is one that I oftentimes see as a big miss out there. You're really glad you reminded me of that concept of people oftentimes set up a standard user as a conference room, and that's a mistake.
Well, yeah, you were saying it, but I really wanted it to, come out there in a highlighted form, because that was a big miss that you shared with me before. So we've hit our 10 tips. We do have a couple of call to actions here. Number one, if you want to talk to SnapTech IT, get it with an expert today, or in the next couple of days. We have a QR code that'll take you to a scheduling calendar where you can ask additional questions, even discuss a risk assessment. That's oftentimes the very first way that SnapTech IT engages with prospects or clients, is checking out and making sure that we do a risk discovery. The second way that you could interact with us right now is also, maybe you don't want to talk to anybody right now. I don't know why you wouldn't. Carl's a super nice guy. You could have some time on his calendar, but maybe you're just like, oh, I just want to spend more time with these people. And I like these guys. They are funny guys. That's a nice line from the Three Amigos. Anyway, you could register for our next live webinar. It'll be happening Thursday, September 26th. We're going to be diving into how Defense in Depth will save your business from cybersecurity breaches and data loss. So let's leave those up there. We did have a question from the audience still hanging out there. Carl, this one goes to you. How does one open a new meeting on iPhone to record and transcribe? I don't know what screen to start with, and I'm looking at the chat screen at the moment. So I know that you shared some screenshots of it. When I got that question, I went into my own iPhone and went into Teams, and I wasn't finding the exact same screenshots. So perhaps you could chat us through that.
There might be multiple ways to do this. So if anybody wants to also offer it, I go to the calendar and I hit a calendar button, because then it creates a meeting for me that I just joined, even if I'm the only person in it. So that's been my method, either in my Outlook app on my phone or in Teams. I go to the calendar and I just add a new meeting there, like it's an appointment, like scheduled on my time, and then join it, and then I hit the record button and I'm off to the races. Now my AI stuff is configured to automatically join my meetings already, so I don't have to think about, is Copilot there and going to transcribe things once I hit record. If that makes sense. And so hopefully that kind of gets you there, because you have to be thinking in the context of a meeting to record. So that's how that happens. To me, the only way I've initiated that is through the calendar function.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for fielding that question there. Thank you, everybody, for attending our webinar. As we shared before, we'll get a recording out to you within about 24 hours. We appreciate all of the people who submitted questions during this. And again, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out for us. The QR codes are there on the screen to set up either an appointment with somebody from SnapTech IT or to register for our next webinar. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Carl, any final words?
Yeah, one last thing I'll tell you. It's like if neither of these are for you right now, you can always go to snaptechit.com/resources, and you can see the list of all of the webinars we've done. You can look at the recordings, you can see our white papers. You might want to explore some other topics that we've covered there as well.
Very good. All right, thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Carl, and we hope to see you soon.